Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and hope you can all hear me well. My name is Ciprian Arhire, as Monica mentioned, and I wear multiple hats in my role of engaging with the HR profession. So up until a few months ago, I was full-time employed with CAPD, supporting the development of the market understanding of HR, leading the CAPD London strategy and a series of projects and programs across the spectrum of HR, organizational development, and D&I. Since end of last year, I've moved, my employment has moved into a different organization, but my role has stayed into leading on the CAPD London network for fellows and senior practitioners, which is a network we've founded last year in support of HR professionals across the region around how do we navigate some of the challenges from COVID-19 and the impact it has on organizations. How do we get more resource into our supporting networks of what are some of the case studies across organizations of what good practice looks like around HR, but also how do we push the boundaries of what HR means for fellows and leaders of HR, but also senior professionals. Now, I'm delighted that for the past a year and a bit, we've delivered a series of these sort of events of engaging senior practitioners in topics around HR transformation, around diversity and inclusion, and around responding to the COVID-19 global pandemic, Black Lives Matter. So probably if it's been on your strategic agenda as a senior HR professional, we've touched on it in the past year. What we will be doing in the future is we'll be exploring more and more of these topics and keep our ears to the ground to make sure that all of these areas are still highly relevant to our senior professionals. But also, if you have any suggestions or any ideas or anything that's a burning idea from an HR leader or from a senior people professional, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me to share some of those ideas. Now, the topic of tonight's presentation, I'm going too fast, has sort of sparked a lot of conversation from looking at how organizations almost get together or get their act together for shaping the future of work. And in that respect, the role of HR in shaping and nudging organizations to respond to current market needs. And through a lot of conversations that I initially started with Catalina, who's joining us today, we've started with this sort of large landscape of transformation and what it means for organizations. And then we narrow down exactly into, on the people agenda and the HR strategy, what are some of the elements that we can drive HR transformation around, and how is this HR transformation driven by within organizations can actually future-proof that business model that the organization is trying to deliver. And through conversation, we've also explored who will be some of the most amazing people that will be able to bring some great stories to life around what works in HR transformation. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things that should be on the top of your mind when you're thinking about onboarding or engaging with HR transformation? What are some of the things that you should bring around you as you're building your HR transformation roadmap? But also learning from other organizations, how can we actually together as a people profession navigate HR transformation? So I'm delighted that I'm in presence of greatness, as I like to say, and I have some amazing speakers joining me today. And I'll start with Catalina, who is the Chief People Officer for Futurelearn. She has a background of working for Vodafone, T-Mobile, and GE. She has joined Futurelearn from Vodafone, where she most recently had the role of Global Head of Learning and Capabilities, being responsible for the reskilling, upskilling, and learning culture strategy for the FTSE 200 companies, 100,000 employees across 25 countries. Now, Catalina has spent a lot of her career in HR leadership positions for T-Mobile in Netherlands. She began her international career in 2002 as a member of the Human Resources Leadership Program at GE, and also will be sharing with us some of her stories from joining Futurelearn, but also some of the challenges that as an HR professional you would face in an organization of that size and complexity. Now, Claire Courtney, on the other hand, she's the Senior Vice President of Organizational Effectiveness at Finastra, and she comes with a background of almost bridging between HR and, as you would have seen in her description, being a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. So, and in her experience, she has spent years of working in HR transformation, in organizational effectiveness, and looking at how do we drive better health for organizations across Vodafone, and some other big name of organizations that I'm not going to share now, but I will allow Claire to take us on a journey around that. And her perspective for today will be specifically around, from an org design and OD perspective, how do we navigate organizational transformation, and what are some of the lessons learned that HR professionals and HR leaders can take on board in this respect? And Eliza will sort of close that journey of exploration and case studies, building on the idea that Claire will bring forward and consolidate the OD and learning perspective of HR transformation. She's going to share with her some of the examples of sort of transformation outside of HR and how she's bringing them into the domain of HR. What are some of her ideas, and what we've promised for tonight will be quite a frank and honest and direct conversation around HR transformation. No like sort of filters put on in the way we're going to discuss HR transformation tonight. Now, Eliza currently is the Global People Development and Learning Director for the Active Cosmetic Division at L'Oreal. She's a business-minded learning and organizational development leader with experience across a range of world's leading organizations. Now, what is quite interesting about Eliza is that she spent the start of her career in organizational psychology and behavior economics for more than 7 years, then moved into banking for a while, leading on organizational development and being an HR director across different organizations, and then ended up in 2017 in L'Oreal, leading one of their global divisions. So what we will be doing for the next few minutes is we're going to listen to 3 very straightforward and honest conversations about lessons learned on HR transformation. Post these 3 presentations from the great speakers that we have with us, we're going to go into a panel discussion. And I'm going to prompt you in the chat with some links where you can add your questions and your comments as we're going through the conversation. Now, I will be in the background for the time of the presentation, and you're going to see my face pop up again when it's time for Q&A. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Catalina to take over the virtual stage.
Thank you, Chip. Good evening, everyone, and delighted to be in such great company. Both my fellow speakers, who are just giants in HR. I know both Eliza and Claire for many years, and just fantastic, lots of great stories to share today. So I'm actually looking forward, as you are, to hear from them. What I'll try to do, and also delighted to see previous colleagues, a lot of Vodafone alumni, so hi everyone, sending some digital hugs. Again, lovely company. Thanks, Chief, for bringing us together. Look, I'll try to kind of tell a story from my life going and working with the cool kids in digital natives companies. So I, as Chip said, a year or so ago, I joined Futurelearn, which is a global social learning platform, pretty much a native digital company employing about 300 people, half of our staff is actually working in DevOps, in Scrum. So I moved from a global company, Vodafone, which was going on the digital transformation journey and doing Agile, into a company that it's working in Agile. But I like to kind of go back in time, or memory lane, and share some of the lessons learned when at Vodafone in the Global Center of Expertise, leading capability and learning. We were moving into doing and being Agile, and what it meant to the HR function, what it meant in terms of transforming the HR function at the core in order to support that business transformation that was going across 25 countries, 100,000 employees. So really, long story short, so hopefully many of you know Vodafone. You are either customers or previous customers or ex-employees, as some of you tonight. A large total communications company based out of London, but with a global footprint, over 100,000 people working to deliver great service. And it's probably, back in the days, it probably started on this digital transformation journey in 2008. Maybe it wasn't even a thing. I don't think we called it digital transformation back then. And in the early days, what they did, they got decent IT systems, they centralized them, they moved HR into one system, which our previous CHRO was very proud of. He's now leading the people agenda at Pepsi. He used to remind us, like Claire, about how we had one system, we built shared services, and therefore we were able to have one version of the truth and decent people analytics at the time, again, before our times. But then, so again, Vodafone had that advantage of an underbelly of technology. So the organization was already familiar with tech. And then fast forward 2015 or 2016, I think, what happened in HR, we were very early adopters of digital transformation. Because we had all the tech stack, we already had video interviews. So we had that kind of DNA already. So we're probably one of the first functions to see that opportunity, what it meant for the whole company. And we started looking at digital employee experience. So it was kind of phase one in kind of transforming the HR function to be much more of a digital native Agile. And I think we all, due to a very enlightened head of the COE who was ahead of the time, we stepped up and took accountability for this employee experience, which again, right now it's a function in itself, it's evolving, it's, a lot of ink is thrown on it, a lot of companies have a very robust employee experience function. But again, I'm talking, this is down the memory lane almost 10 years ago. But we called it employee experience early on, and we did it cross-functionally because we realized that this is not an HR thing. You cannot transform employee experience end-to-end without the support of the likes of tech, IT, property, supply chain, finance. So we put this kind of cross-functional strategy together that we steered the core. And we had a full approach, not just to the tech stack that we like and the experience and the wow moments that employees need to have, but also what's the governance about it, who funds it, who manages it. So again, that was kind of a first milestone in how we kind of transform the HR function to support a broader transformation of the company, starting with the core of how do you make your employees feel and think every touch point, and how you enable them to do a better job every day with the use of technology. Then what happened in the business? If you go 2017 around, it became really apparent that we had so many digital transformation programs across the company, including this one, that we needed to kind of put them all together under the umbrella of what we call a digital first, and enroll the support of the ExCo and of the CEO. So we really started to look broader about what's the impact of this exponential technology on the customer experience and ultimately on the company performance, and what it meant also going back to the design of the people processes from performance, job architecture, development, and reward perspective. And what was the opportunity to actually serve customers differently? And of course, what type of organization capabilities you needed to underneath that, right? And what I think was a significant shift for us was understanding particularly the new skills in commercial and technology. And as we wanted to move to Agile or Agile Light in the end, And we scaled Agile very fast. I think we went from about 18 months to having squads across 16 countries, about 2,000 people moving fully in squads. And again, imagine this is a company with large infrastructure work. We used to work in waterfall with a very rigid quarterly finance process. So again, it's easier said than done. It's easy when you are Spotify and you are a cool Scandinavian startup that only has 2 products to talk about Agile. It's a different thing when you are a larger company, again, that works traditionally in waterfall, that's global, that's kind of complex, lots of stakeholders. So we thought, okay, because we were embarking on this, we've done a lot of benchmark, a lot of research. We talked to the Spotifys of this world. We talked to ING. We're also kind of pioneering in adopting Agile in HR. And ultimately, we partner with McKinsey because we realized that there was a huge transformation we need to do at the core. We were out of our comfort zone. We didn't really understand back then what exactly the new skills are. I mean, we knew them on a kind of superficial level, but back then, again, there wasn't even a proper taxonomy out there that we could go and buy or borrow. And then, we realized that also HR lacks a fundamental skill, the skill of the skills. And some of the guys and ladies who are on the call tonight, they will remember the pain of us going and interviewing hundreds of experts and doing benchmark and figuring out what are those skills and how can we measure them and how can we adopt them in an Agile world where, according to McKinsey, the nano measure of performance in squads is the skill, right? So you have to be very, very specific about what that skill is, how you measure it, how you improve it, because that's how ultimately you measure performance in squads versus your traditional way of performance management. So a lot, again, that was kind of the biggest, maybe by design, the biggest struggle and challenge that we had in HR, how we get up to speed ourselves as a function, understanding the new technology skills, how we're able to measure them, how we're building the whole skill infrastructure into our org design and into our job architecture, and Claire is an expert in that. I should probably tell you more about that. Not an easy task, especially when you have an SAP SuccessFactors as a backbone. So not exactly the most, let's say, flexible systems, and also you lack the taxonomy. You have to build it from scratch, and at the same time you have to turn all your job architecture upside down, because as you know, in Agile there is no hierarchy, right? You have squads that work independently. They don't necessarily have a line manager. Your line manager is the chapter lead. So a lot of this kind of reinventing the wheel process where you have to forget everything you learned, you unlearn, and you go and build Agile, not for the sake of being Agile and being cool and trendy, but to drive business results and to drive a faster transformation. So look, I mean, those of you who are familiar with Agile, you know that it's a very employee bottom-up way of doing work. So if you look back into what would that mean if all HR functions will move into pure Agile, so not just driving Agile transformation for your company, but also becoming Agile yourself. You look at having no leaders, having self-managed teams, not working in sprints versus in waterfall, not knowing exactly what your products will end up being, right? Doing a lot of iterations and working with MVPs, not perfections. I wouldn't, myself, I wouldn't want to have payroll in Agile, right? Because it's a lot of iterations. I think you want to get payroll perfect every month with no trial and error. But there's a lot of aspects in HR that we can actually adopt in this Agile light. And it's specifically around ways of working. You could be from the get-go much more experimental, trial and error, test assumptions and products before you launch them. A good example is many times, I worked in L&D before, in recruitment, you are kind of attracted to have the shiny new learning experience portal or this new app or things, and you think, oh my God, this is going to be a great, well, wait until you are doing a bit of A/B testing and you see that your users are actually not all over it, right? So again, Agile in HR makes a lot of sense in terms of having this mindset of being more iterative, not striving for perfection, getting more feedback from your customers, from your end users before you launch something, try and error, be much more humble and ready to unlearn and relearn kind of new skills. I think, and also if you move beyond the tools and routines, because Agile has a lot of great tools, like for example, you can use Kanban boards to track how fast you're recruiting IT talent, for example, right? You can use stand-ups to get these team routines, especially now as everybody's still at home. It's a good practice. We probably all forcefully adopted from Agile, where you have these daily stand-ups and you talk about your day and unblock issues. But again, it's more than the routines and the practice, more about a mindset, and it's very linked to growth mindset. There's a lot of great things you can adopt and learn in Agile without being a Scrum Master or without being a developer. I would encourage you to try those things. Those of you who haven't done it before. Again, I'm now lucky enough to work in a kind of Agile native company where Agile is just the way we do work, right? We don't think about this. We don't think about our routines. We have stand-ups all the time. We use Kanban. We track our progress. We iterate. We use A/B testing all the time. But I guess, as I said, appreciate that it's a bit more complicated to do it in complex organizations with a lot of stakeholders, with more rigid systems. Look, I think it's a journey. It's much more popular and much more, let's say, common these days than it was a couple of years ago when we started on this journey at Vodafone. I personally learned a lot. There's a lot still out there to improve in terms of companies becoming truly agile. And I think it starts by sharing all these learnings, because look, there's a lot of articles, there's a lot of case studies, but a lot of these case studies don't tell you how hard it is, right, to move the needle, to change the mindset. I think you can change the technology, you can change the practices, but the mindset takes, building a new routine and building a new framework takes longer than, adopting just some new technology or some new routines. So I think that's my kind of short story about transforming Agile, doing Agile transformation for the HR function. I'm not sure how we're doing this, Chip. We're having questions afterwards, right? So I guess I pass it over to Claire now.
Yes, so thank you very much, Catalina. It's been an enlightening conversation. Now, Claire, do you want to take us over?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. So as Chip said, I'm Claire Courtney. I currently work at Finastra, which is a software company producing software for financial services. And I have worked in a number of companies, including Vodafone, BT, Balfour BT, Lang & Rourke. So many, both technology and infrastructure organizations in the past. And what I'd like to talk to you a bit about is my experience of transforming HR from the organization design side of things. I think Elise's going to talk about, I've actually had more experience often transforming other parts of the business and less on HR. And I think that'll be one of the things that's interesting to explore. So Catalina talked to us about how taking in Agile into our own function. And I'm sure we've done many projects about Agile elsewhere in the organization, and how much do we remember to apply the practices to ourselves. So I think I have sort of 4 or 5 points I would make about transformation from an organization design point of view. And they're about the vision, the dialogue, the design, the execution, and then the effectiveness and reinforcement. And so we talk about the vision. So over the years, I've helped organizations adopt the ALRIC model, explore the adoption of Agile, or think about how they want to be more data friendly, data driven, or get more focused on talent, and how do they really become strategic in their talent piece. I don't think it matters what the focus or the driver is, and I think in this phase we'll have some new drivers. I think being more data driven is going to continue to be a big theme for our function. I think how we make sure that we stay as relevant as we have become this year with our well-being and our focus on organisational health, both from a strategic and an effectiveness point of view, will continue to be massively important. I think the vision for what role you want HR to play and what that really means is fundamentally important to any successful transformation. And we all say vision, and then I'm not sure we spend enough time bringing it to life for people. I think you have to be able to make it understandable in layman's terms. So I'm particularly challenging was whenever we started talking Ulrich model to the business and said, oh, we're going to adopt the Ulrich model. And they're like, the what, the who, the why? If you can't make it feel like they understand both the why and the what it's going to look like, I think you start to lose your partners on the journey, let alone your own function. So that's why I come into the topic of dialogue. So for me, there's two parts. Firstly, be able to describe the vision in a way that people can understand. Be able to make it so specific that people can say, I came to work yesterday and it looked like this. I'm going to come to work over the next few weeks and it's going to look and feel like this, and it's going to be different. In what way? And I mean really specific. So the best example I can give of this is when the construction industry has gone on the journey of safety management. They were able to articulate that the change they wanted to see was that people would come to work on some construction sites and there'd be a lot of site supervisors and lots of rules and lots of protective equipment, and you would be monitored and checked for whether you were being safe. Then you would come to work on a different environment with a different culture where you would take accountability for your own safety. And what that meant was there would be fewer people checking. But if you had any sense of self-preservation, is that you would look after yourself and you would look after others. So you would call others out. And the ability to describe that really specifically means that people could engage in the transformation. Because the moment we start talking about we're going to transform, it's all very exciting, but until you can make it feel real, it's just a set of words. And so that for me is the vision. But then it's the dialogue that you need to have around that. So it's the starting to tell the story. And I think all of us know that for culture change, but also for any kind of transformation, it's that telling of the story and the retelling of the story. But for me, it's not just telling, it's the dialogue. It's the starting to have the conversation. It's the listening back from your own function, but also the dialogue with the business. So I see articles saying, I don't know, company X, they've got rid of HR. And I think, no, what they've done is they've moved away from having people with the label of HR, because we all still need to manage our people. But they're saying we don't think that the HR function is helping us manage our people. And part of me thinks, fantastic, they're actually taking accountability for managing their people themselves. But then we need to be really clear in our dialogue with our business partners what it is we do. And we need to be really proud of how that makes a difference to how they deliver as a company. And that dialogue about, again, really specific. Yesterday we did these things. Tomorrow we're going to do those things, and it's going to give you this benefit. And this is why we're transforming. And this is why it's right for the company. Because otherwise what happens is you start to execute on any organisation design change is you get lots of backlash. Oh, but yesterday I was doing this and now you're asking me to do this new thing, but you haven't taken away the old thing. Or, well, we said line managers were going to do that, but they're not doing it. So now I can't move because they haven't moved. So the dialogue sets you up. Then get to the design. So I think we'll talk later about pitfalls. I think I spend more time in my career talking about don't rush to boxes. Stop drawing org charts. Please don't rush to boxes. And lo and behold, don't rush to people in boxes. But obviously design is an important part of the process. And you do need to get to it. But vision, dialogue, and then design. And again, being able to describe how you want the function to work. And I don't mean the boxes, I mean, how do you want work to flow? So Catalina talked about, we want us to work in scrums, we want to be flat, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to feel like, this is how the process is going to be different. We can describe it all before we've drawn any charts. I think Catalina also talked about how it needs to work end to end. So again, the interfaces for me is another part of that design. Then get to execution. Execution actually, I think, is our secret sauce in our function. I think we tend to be awesome at execution, whether it's other transformations or our own. I'm not for saying that obviously with technology there are challenges when we're adopting new technology, but I think as a function we tend to be pragmatic, roll up our sleeves and good at execution. Then the fifth one, which is so often forgotten, is review and reinforce. Review and reinforce. So how often have we been on a project, and it's the same for any change project, where everyone says, oh, that's it, job done, we moved the boxes, everybody's now working differently. And of course we all know that that's not how it works. We all slip back into what we were doing yesterday. We've all gone on diets or new health kicks and you slip back. So unless you're reviewing and reinforcing, in my view, you will slip back. So for me, and you know, it's difficult sometimes to sort of bring it to life with examples, partly because a lot of those are quite undiscussable. But whenever I've worked with an organisation, the successful transformations are the ones where at the end of the step, as you're reinforcing it, people understood what they were going to do, why it was going to be different. And whether that was at Vodafone, where we were very clearly going on a journey and moving first the phase, which is almost probably before Catalina's time, which was about really getting ourselves into a more strategic dialogue and a more strategic role with our business, and then moving on to adopting the digital and agile. Then the success is when we've reinforced it and people feel like they are working day in, day out in that way. The final thing I would add would be, you know, for me, don't be apologetic. So I think that sometimes, particularly with HR transformation, we worry a lot about, are we going to be seen to be washing the windows while the business is burning by spending time on ourselves? But actually, if you take the other challenge is, you know, in an airplane, put the air mask on yourself before you put it on your children. If we aren't in great shape, how can we help the business? And so I think we shouldn't be apologetic about the time we take to get our function working well. I also think we shouldn't be apologetic about the role and the value we add, and that we should be pushing back if we are finding ourselves in a space where we're apologising and saying, no, we'll pick that up because the change is too hard for the line managers or for the business. Because I think if our logic was valid and our proposition is good and strategic, then we need to work that through, and that's a change management challenge. So keep coming back to the vision, and equally keep role modelling the change we want to see, both within our own function and the way we hold the business to account. And I'm going to hand over to Lisa, who's going to talk about it from an org development and skills point of view.
Thank you, Claire. Very happy to be here with you. I hope you hear me well. And I'm Elisa Bassi, and as Ciprian said, I am currently leading people development and learning at L'Oréal for the Active Cosmetics division. But I have many years of experience in transformation. So what I'm going to share with you are a few points that I believe are lessons that I've learned, and around what could help to drive successfully a transformation, either HR or other function. And then I'm going to end by saying something about a few elements that I think are relevant, particularly right now when it comes to organizational development and learning. So first of all, my lessons learned. When you're driving a transformation from an organizational development HR role, is your function, is another function. My suggestion that could be a little bit provocative is be a business leader, not just a business partner. Really think business. So just understand the business model of your company, understand the business strategy, understand what is happening in the environment that is going to impact on these two elements, and then think how HR, for the processes HR managers, can contribute to the success of the company. But on the other hand, HR is HR. So what I also suggest as a second point is really aim at a human-centric organization. The organization is the vehicle for people to better their lives and improve the lives of people they serve. So these two elements, kind of a relentless focus on the business, but also aiming at really being the champion and aiming at designing a human-centric organization, for me, are two elements. Very important. Another element is whoever are the business leaders who are engaged in this transformation, what for me works very well in the past is taking them through a sequence stepped process that is very logically connected, starting with a strategic analysis, which is for me absolutely key. And I'm going to mention a famous kind of Einstein, I believe, quote saying, if I had 1 hour to solve the problem, I would spend the first 55 minutes to understand what the problem is, and the last 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And when it comes to transformation, the importance for me are really, okay, what is the environment? What is the situation? Diagnosing also the existing design of the organization. What are the current level of performance? What is the human outcomes? What is the vision? And here I connect very much with what Claire said. What is the future vision, the future strategy? What are the key capabilities that we need to have that are going to be the one that we're going to choose our competitive differentiator, and then analyze the gaps and choose the new strategy and choose the new design. If you take the leaders through this process and they see how every decisions they take leads to another step and decision on the transformation, you might start already building that kind of leadership team leading the transformation that is really capable to role model, to tell a story like Claire was saying, which is also for me absolutely critical. So this is for me is the engagement of the people in the transformation is another important element. Something that could look very much kind of irrelevant, but for me is not. The smart choice of when and how using external consultant in driving the transformation, and how to mix them with internal people and internal consultants that are, collaborating. A transformation will take years usually. There is the design, and then there is the implementation, and then the activation, etc. So having the right team where you get someone from outside and someone from inside, and the person which is an insider, maybe OD internal consultant, OD specialist, OD leader, etc., etc. It's what gives a continuity, what mitigates the risk that you have a first phase on organizational design, and then when you move into the change and the implementation of maybe a new operating model, there's something between that is lost. So use smartly external consultants and internal OD experts. Something also that I've learned is how important the activation part. Whenever you want to transform your function, think about the micro design, which is how do we take decisions, how certain processes are flowing. This is so important. This is also resonate with what Claire was saying. A new organization does not come to life if people cannot engage and there is no clarity on how these new organization actually works in practice. So there is the importance of saying, what is going to be different very specifically, but also what I suggest and recommend is engage people in the design of the details of how this new vision of the organization actually works, and have since the very beginning this what I call activation part of the transformation, which is a combination of detailed design and change management. This is where I have seen many times the pitfalls in the transformations. So another element that could be a little bit provocative, it would say, if you're not ready, think twice before starting a transformation. And what I'm saying, indicators of readiness is if you have not the leaders that are willing and able to carry out a strategic change, or if you have maybe some senior managers that are not entirely supporting the change, maybe you should think to something different. That could be coaching, to building, to align the people. Another point that I wanted to bring to your attention is like learning is not change, communication is not change, culture change is not like any other kind of change. So when you are in this kind of world of transformation, which means really not fine-tuning, but changing the norms, the behaviors, and whatever, be sure that you use the different kind of processes in the right way. Sending people to learning too soon, or asking learning to actually be capable to change some behaviors or some elements of the basic assumptions, not maybe using the right tools in the right way, the right processes for the right target. Very finally, I would say sometimes it's very important to, and again, I connect with what Claire said about being specific. I have found sometimes very valuable to bring people to the point where we discuss openly what are the benefits that you expect of the transformations. How do you measure that you're getting there? There might be a need of creativity because it's not always easy there, but these are levels that can create a definition. How do we know if we're achieving what we want to achieve with this transformation? It's something that helps the people that are working on the transformation, maybe sometimes to be more concrete and to work better within the requirements, the constraints, but also the ambition, because you bring them to a sort, okay, how this works in practice, how are we going to say if we actually have achieved what we wanted to achieve. And then a very final a comment is about, you might be in situations where you have to choose your battles. And this is my experience. There are some elements of the transformation that have a very important impact on the success on the new performances, on how you work, on the outcome of people. That and this is kind of how you take decisions. So everything around, if you have to choose your battles, I would suggest focus on decision-making processes, focus on clarity around allocation of decision rights, who is taking the decisions, and focus also on the information flows. There are a lot of research saying that these elements do have a kind of significant impact. So you have to choose your battles, how you take decisions, how informations are flowing in different parts of the organization. If these are not well designed, not well understood, you might have a little bit of struggles in delivering the benefits of the transformation. And I'm not adding anything because Claire was already super clear and super thorough in this. Now I wanted to move briefly to something about what is happening now in learning and organizational development. There are a few elements that are becoming very relevant and very challenging. One is the need of adapting at the speed of change. I have never seen a moment where the shelf life of skills is so short like today, where the business's strategy is changing as often, or no, not often, but rapidly, because the technology is innovating at the speed of light. Science, social changes, is really the acceleration of change, and the impact that the acceleration and change has on skills and capabilities, so that are constantly becoming, maybe more rapidly becoming obsolete. This is one of the challenges that as HR, we should be very mindful of. So whatever is a transformation is not just about lifting off the ground a system to develop skills, but also thinking about how do I keep these skills constantly updated at the same speed of change? That is for me one of the key elements. Second, another element that is becoming more and more relevant is the HR service delivery is becoming key. Is not because we are moving from a moment where we were looking for scalable efficiencies. Now, for me, one of the key strategic differentiator, competitive advantages is becoming scalable learning. Because of this change, because the business model can change, because the skills can change, the technology, what is becoming a true competitive differentiator is the ability of learning fast and learning fast at scale. This, in any sort of transformation of HR, is something that I would definitely suggest to take into consideration. Another element is that the skills are becoming key. Catalina said it, and also Claire. So what I suggest is to ensure that whatever is the transformation you're going to lead in HR, you have a clear view of what are the organizational capabilities and what are the skills that are required to enable those organizational capabilities. You might be surprised that if you don't have this conversation with the leaders in a very timely, constantly updated way, you might find yourself focusing not on the right targets in terms of skills, or not in the right way of developing skills, because this is the business where, and the speed of change that is telling. Another element which is very dear to me is what is happening with the COVID pandemic. Have a kind of, is very demanding for people. I think that in the future, whatever is the transformation of HR you will think, or what I suggest and invite you to think is something: what do we do for the well-being of people? What do we do for the health of people? What do we do to help them navigating something that could be very demanding energy-wise, and so new ways of working, and also something about their own identity. For some people, navigating through these kind of changes could be very demanding. So I think that, for instance, what I see as something that could be very interesting is to bring more of the behavioral science knowledge in the HR function, and the transformation could be a good opportunity. Then is like, finally, do not let educational technology, when I'm coming and I'm talking about learning, and do not let educational technology drive your transformation, but focus on what is the vision of the future, what is your strategy, what do you want it to become, how you're going to help the business to be successful, how you're going to build the key organizational capability. The technology should enable this vision, not the vision being designed around the technology. That is my final piece of advice. And then I will have to stop here, because I would like to let time to people to post, to make questions to Catalina or to Claire or to myself. And I hope what I shared was helpful for you.
Yes, it has. Thank you very much, Eliza. And I think before we actually go into questions, I was going to prompt Catalina and Claire for any reflections now that they've seen the flow of the session and how the conversation took place.
I like the call out on social sciences, and I think you know, as someone who worked in learning before and obviously work in a learning company right now, we underestimated the ability of the human brain to cope with so much change and information, and I think we forgot about the science of learning. So now there's a big trend, if you have probably heard about Professor Barbara Oakley, who wrote a very famous book about mind shift, and she has one of the most successful MOOCs ever, learning how to learn. That's something that we as a profession, I think we should be preaching and learning, right? Reminding people that yes, transformation brings a lot of new technology things, you know, even, you know, if I take myself, I consider myself a very techie person. Well, I moved from full Windows to a full iOS and Mac last year, and I think it probably took me 6 months to get adjusted, right? As I was also juggling a new job, a new industry. So again, I think going back to, you know, learning how to learn and getting much better, more granular and more scientific in our trade, right? We've got really good at driving change, execution, hard skills. I think as a professional, we kind of suffer from the shoemaker without the shoe syndrome. And I think it's kind of time to go back to basics and learning how to learn and unlearn, and you know, applying again a lot of the good work in the science side of the house into our trade. So thank you for reminding that, Eliza. And I think Eliza, are you still? She's teaching at King's College, so we got a kind of lecture today. I really enjoy that. Don't need to go to King's College these days.
So Chip, I would have said what was very interesting was the common themes that we brought up around the tendency when you're trying to do transformation to lean on the boxes and the learning and the training rather than the dialogue and the discussion about how we want it to be. and Catalina talked about the kind of, we want pace, we want speed, but we need to have an understanding. She talked about some of the challenges that if you, particularly if you're leading edge, that you need to be prepared to learn and unlearn and fail and develop from there. And how do you work out which bits you have to get right and which bits you can iterate, which I think is, important. So, it's not a once and done on any transformation. It's a iterative. I always think you nudge an organisation forward. We always talk about transformation, but I think a transformation is a series of nudges, with a reinforcing theme along the way, rather than this big bang. At least in my experience, I've never seen a big bang outcome.
An overnight shift.
I wish.
Done and dusted. Perfect. Thank you very much for that. It's been really exciting, and I've taken a lot of notes across this. And to get us started on the questions, I'm just going to pick some that already came in the questions list. And I think the first one that sort of sparked my interest was around what are some of the critical skills and capabilities that you as an HR leader, you will bring around yourself to be able to navigate HR transformation effectively.
So I'm happy to start and others add. I think Elisa talked about it. Be a leader. So be a business leader. I think she said, which I think is so true. So it's that. I think there's two parts of that. So it's one is lead in a business way as the leader, and the second part is understand the business, and it will vary in the kind of business you're in, but how is the business making money, what makes a difference. Catalina talked about if you don't understand how that's actually impacting customers because you're impacting the employee experience, then you're becoming too insular. So that outside in, so I think that's, for me, those two big skills, that being a business leader, and the second thing is that outside in, whether it's really understanding the outside in and the customers, but also the outside in from the business into the function.
I think I will add to that, is very much linked to being a business leader. Oftentimes, HR is guilty of being seen as the fluffy function, right? Where the people's people, we get all the social dynamics, but we don't know our numbers. And I think we build much more credibility with the business leaders to drive transformation if you know your numbers as well. And it's probably not our most natural skill, right? It's something that you have to learn. You have to know how to use data to make business cases and to prove, also the measure transformation, measure that impact. How do you measure that if you don't know your numbers, right? So again, that's something that that's really key on the agenda of the kind of upskilling HR. And obviously we're much better tools now than we were many years ago when all of us started our HR function journey. And there's a lot of wise people out there in the business that you can work with. There's data scientists, the data analysts, but I think honing your kind of analytical and data skills will come in very handy to bring evidence to the table, and again to be considered as a valuable business partner, not just the people person, which of course that is still very important, right? I mean, being the human in human resources is very much important. Look at the last year where our empathy and people skills came in handy, right? But again, I think the data bit is super important as well, also in the context of driving transformation.
I'm not going to quote myself again, because you already done it. I'm very thankful for that. If I can add what are other skills, and I'm even not repeating myself on, well, yeah, we are seeing some unprecedented phenomenon. So really for me, the skills is go deeper on how you can have the positive impact on people that a function like human resources should have. I wanted to be a little bit specific here. You don't build a skill in the same way you drive a transformational learning that brings people maybe to develop a new way of seeing the world. You don't design a process to upskill people, which is going deeper on what you already do, in the same way you design a reskilling process, which is learning to do something new. And if you don't understand how you can help people navigating all these processes. And understanding means also going a little bit deeper. I'm connecting with what Catalina was saying. That for me is something that we have to bring out of the room of the academia and bring inside the organizations, because there is a lot of amazing research that people like Adam Grant, all these kind of people have done that are really applicable and could help us to be more sharp, more straightforward, to say, I want to help these people to navigate these difficulties, and this is how I can do it without trials and errors and see and using the usual. So that for me is one element. The second element is digital, social media. We have to know more about, we have to be at the same pace of the people we try to help. So digital, data, and technologies. So these are the kind of thing that I will bring as new upskilling.
Perfect. Thank you, Eliza. I think there's a question that came in the chat, but also something that I was reflecting on. So from an HR leader perspective, how can you best identify what's driving the change and the need for change in HR transformation? Is it internal? Is it external? Where's the need coming from for HR transformation?
Can I just take this question and then let my other colleagues? I am really passionate about the idea of agility as an organizational factor, not only as a project management method or ways of working. And for me, there are 4 elements that are driving the agility of an organization, which is essentially the ability of strategizing, the ability of sensing what is changing, the ability of prototyping, and the ability of implementing. So for me, the way you keep constantly informed is to have designed, how, particularly sensing, how do you design the way for your function to sense that something is changing? And there's like a customer, listening to customers, there are many, many ways. But for me, is aiming at being an agile organization, not in the sense of be capable to apply Scrum and those methods, but have the agility factor as an organization. And for me, these are not for me. I mean, there was kind of Chris Worley that theorized about the agility factor, not me. Have these kind of 4 processes well-defined, working very well, because this is what keeps you agile as an organization. That's my point of view. And maybe Catalina and Claire wanted to add some comments.
No, so I would I think that's very, I actually agree with you. Agility is something I'm very keen that organizations in all of the functions, so that they can continue to respond, and thankfully it keeps me employed, because I don't think organization design ever stops, so that's a relief.
Definitely.
So I think you sometimes get points where you need a bigger shift, and I think it can vary. So I think sometimes that will be a conscious rebirth of an organization, new leaders, they have a review and a reflect, and they see a gap. That might be because, I think we are going to see a number of HR transformations as a result of the year the COVID and what's happened, and a rethink about some of our role and our scope. So, and sometimes it's a technology, we're introducing new technology, or we recognize that the business is going to, so there's always a business driver. You take some of the reskilling, the transformations of HR, because their focus is going to need to change, because they've got to reskill the organization in a more fundamental way. So some of the energy companies or the tobacco companies that are going to fundamentally change what they do and how they do it, then I can't imagine you don't need to transform HR in order to transform the business. So I think the driver will vary, and sometimes it will be packaged as it will be called a one and done, and in my view never is. And in other times you will see, actually Vodafone I think would be a good example, where I don't think they ever called out, they called out parts of the journey along the way, and at times I think it might have had a transformation label, and other times it didn't. But actually, if you look at 10 years, the transformation was phenomenal. But I don't think anybody called it a 10-year transformation journey, because I'm not sure we'd have all signed up for that. So I'm almost saying I think it depends, if I'm honest.
Perfect. I'll pick up the next question. So the next question that has 7 votes comes from Jenny, and it's, how do you get over the issue of change fatigue if you are constantly on an agile treadmill? I think this was submitted when Catalina was talking about agile ways of working in Futurelearn, but obviously relevant to the context across the organization that Claire and Eliza are working with as well. Catalina, do you want to take this on first?
Yeah, I think Claire touched on that. Sometimes that fatigue is driven by how we label things. And if you have a smart communication plan, transformation should be there in the build of everything you're doing without being called out as a project or as an initiative. I think, look, I think that the direction of travel of technology and how skills evolve every 5 years should lead how we transform processes and think org design and everything the same way, right? You just have to, it's a cycle that you go into, and willing or not, you have to always transform something, because otherwise you're behind technology, you're behind what's happening in the world, right? And yes, but I agree, there's a fatigue because the way it's driven, right? It's driven as an initiative, as a big process. And, we have steer codes and you drive it in the most unagile way if you want. And I think oftentimes CHROs don't leverage the communication function in the right way, because you need your comms experts to help you, how you position, how you label, how you drive this without coming, to everybody feeling like, okay, there's another thing we're doing on top of our day jobs, right? If you weave it somehow in the way of working in a day-to-day, almost business as usual, it doesn't feel like something you're doing on top. And I remember, back in the days when we launched Vodafone, Agile in Vodafone, it felt like that. It felt like, oh my God, there's another thing we do on top of the other things we're doing, right? Whereas the idea is, actually it's becoming a way of working, right? And then it's not heavy. Yeah, it's not another initiative or another project that we all are tired of, right? Having one too many. And also, as a generalist, I feel like, we have the BAU function, right? You have to be there for your people. You have to have a lot of time during a day for chats, right? For listening. So how on earth do you manage to do that? Be a good business partner at the same time, drive all of these 5 or 6 transformation projects, right? So I think the skill becomes of, can you kind of embed them in the day-to-day?
Nice. I like that.
Easier said than done.
Getting people on board with the transformation rather than putting transformation on them.
Yeah, I would go back to some of the things Eliza talked about around, if you could create agility in the organization, then it doesn't feel, so I think there is a sort of a what, a how and a who, and Kathleen talked a bit about the how, but if the what is, it's, we can see the coherence of the transformation and where you're going. So you're engaged and you're energized by it, as opposed to, oh my God, it's another thing on top, then that helps in the first place. I think then the how is so massively important. So if you are disrupting the organizations, you're cutting across the organization. If you do it in a clunky way, and what people feel is that what they are is they're trying to do their job and you're coming in and disrupting them. You keep changing their line manager. They've had 6 in a year, and there was this process and it was a 9 box and now it's a 7 box and now it's a 22 box and now it's a 2 box. And it's like, just tell me what you want and I'll do it. Then people are going to feel disrupted instead of in the flow. So you've got to get it to feel like it's in the flow of where you're going. And then I think there is a who, and some of that links back to the piece. There are people who thrive. They thrive on the movement, the pace, the energy, and the change. And they're likely to be in some parts of the business. And your payroll team are unlikely to thrive on changing the process and the rules and the piece every month. So don't do that to them. So, but you need a mix in your function. Yeah, so you need some Duracell bunnies who love working like that and get their comes back to maybe your skills and your mix. But so if you get the right mix, you should be able to energize your organization. For me, the moment people say they're change fatigued, there's 2 parts of me. Part of me is like, intolerant because organizations are continually changing now. The other part of me says, okay, what have these guys been through and how badly was it done that this is how they're feeling? because until you fix that, then they're not going to be. What they mean by change fatigue is I'm disengaged. Fix that, then you can take them on a journey.
Yeah, or
if I can add,
I can't see the messages of where we're heading and all of that. So there's
yeah,
obviously diagnosis that can be done.
And if I can add a final comment, I totally agree with what both Catalina and Claire said. There is one managerial function, I would say, not even a skill, that for me is absolutely critical in this moment of almost always on transformation, which is sense making. So I think that the fatigue is also because you are in this space where you don't know if this is really what you want, what is meaning. So the sense making, which is not taking just the bullet point of the communication, this for me is a fundamental managerial function. And I don't always see the managers, and it's a responsibility of the people who are driving the transformation, not to enable the managers to be sense makers, not to always help them to be sense makers. So this is one of the elements that sometimes drives this fatigue. Another element of the fatigue, of course, is one transformation after the other. Everybody will be fatigued. Nobody likes to change. That's, even if I'm a change manager, I would say that is always very difficult and painful or whatever. But there is one element that would drag people too much time in the transformation, the transition phase. So for me, the transformation should be something where you have really a plan and you try to accelerate the time that people are in this kind of transition phase where what was true before is not true anymore. They have not landed in the future. This is very painful and very energy consuming for people. So like, that is like something that I would say is, I would put in top of my agenda. How do I have a plan since the very, I can tell you something. I've been in a transformation years ago. It was an acquisition of the company I was working for. The acquisition was announced January the 1st. January the 1st, we had a new website with all the functions, the presentation of the leaders, the letters of people that needed. It was a little bit kind of, whoa, but for the fatigue and the emotional cost of the transformation, it was fabulous. Clarity, not a lot of time dragging in. Who's going to be my boss? What is going to be the success? How am I going to be? Everything very clear. Transition phase, very short. You move into the new reality, and then you start understanding how it works. That for me was shocking, but very effective from the transformation point of view.
It shows that the level of planning and the detail that went beforehand.
You don't leave people in a lot of uncertainty for a long time, which is what is causing also a lot of dragging, and also take care. If people need to mourn, let them mourn. You know, that sometimes there is something like a sort of toxic positivity in the transformation. Transformation is not positive for everyone when it's in transformation, and acknowledging this is probably helpful from a certain point of view. That's probably is my side as psychologist. It always kicks in, you know, just kind of a lot of psychology, a lot of understanding of the emotions of people, and using what we already know that is helping them navigating through these transformation that can trigger some uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, and to that, if we don't create enough clarity, then they will fill in the gaps, and what they fill in the gaps might be completely different in one team than the other, than the other, than the other. So rather create clarity from the start on where we're heading, what are the steps, how we're going to get there, what does it mean for people as well. Perfect. Now we're going to go in a bit of the challenges, and I think all of you touched on these challenges, but if you were to count on top 3 HR transformation challenges you've seen in organizations, whether it's in your context or other organizations tackling that, what would be the ones that almost keep you awake at night, that you dream of, you have nightmares about some of those HR transformation challenges?
Who wants to go first?
Let me start with one of mine. So for me, one of the challenges is I'm not sure it quite keeps up at night, but that we're it's sort of 2 parts to it. That I mentioned it earlier, that we're apologetic as a function And I don't see that you know, I don't see finance saying, oh, let me raise your purchase order for you and I'll do all these things. So we're apologetic about how we want to work with a business. And the sort of second part, which also links to that, is that then we don't hold ourselves to our same high standards. So we say to the business, you need to be ruthless in your talent, and then we're not ruthless with ourselves. And I know that's hard. And it's like, you know, in my experience, if you look under the bonnet of the finance budgets, they'll be rubbish. In the same way as, you know, doing it to yourself is hard. But if we don't, then how can we hold our head up high and say we're here to transform the business? So I think it's a really difficult one, because it starts to be so personal and so close to where we are. But this is the one where I think in HR transformation that you've got to be really quite tough love about holding ourselves to account and owning that we believe we're worth that to get there. That would be mine. That's the one I worry about when I embark. I have to be honest, I put my hand up and say, if I ever get asked to do org design for HR, I say, are you sure? Because it's awful, because it's like, then everyone's asking me things like, do you know where we're going on this? And anything that's, you know, undiscussable. And in your just your core, because these are your colleagues and you understand them, it's much harder to be dispassionate. Yeah, I tend to say, yeah, are you sure? Should we bring in some consultants to do this for us? Because it's so close to home.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, I totally agree, Claire. It's about eating our own dog food, right? Or drinking our champagne. And yeah, as I said before, I think we often have the syndrome of, you know, the shoemaker without shoes. And when we don't prioritize ourselves, we are criminal, right? Because if you don't build your capabilities in your function, again, you can't build that, you know, business partnering function muscle, right? You don't have your credibility. So start with yourself first, and then make sure that you are a good, you know, good partners with the business. And often, unfortunately, you have these HR leaders who are all about building a brand and being known for things, and then doing transformation for the wrong reasons. And I think, you know, that's another thing, like, you know, does it make any business sense? Is it really needed? Or is it flavor of the month or something that is, you know, it's worth being tweeted or LinkedIn about? And that's another thing. I think HR, interesting enough, many years ago when I started my career, there were hardly any articles of ACHROs, of HR transformation whatsoever. HR was kind of a backroom kind of function, and now it's become a very out there function, which is great. It's giving us a lot of recognition. It's made the career path also more appealing to other great people that otherwise would have never considered HR. But on the other side, I think we are a bit too much flavor of the month right now, right? And it's all about, you know, look at the fancy new shiny tool that I rolled out, or a new strategy, or the new transformation. So I think that's kind of where you have to strike the balance, transformation with purpose.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. What is keeping me awake at night? You know, given my job, you will not be surprised that upskilling at scale, at speed, and sustainably is one of the things that is keeping me awake at night. Something else that I really have, how can I help the business to be successful? How can I add value to the business? HR is sometimes, because we also have a very big focus on compliance, the risk is that we might be a little bit focused on the processes and the compliance of the processes. For me now is really, how do we become the strategic partner that we could be, which could also imply a change in the mindset and in some disrupting some processes in HR, really disruptive, but in a way that adds value and makes sense, is relevant and impactful. And the third thing that's keeping me awake at night, how can I help people to be happy? Is really like, how can I help people to be healthy, happy, thrive, express their talents, achieve their full potential in this moment, which is in many parts of the world really complicated. These are the three things that are keeping me awake at night.
Nice, I like that. And
no, there is another one. Oh. Allow me to dream. I think it's the time for corporations to be social innovators. So to go outside the boundaries of our organization and do something for the society. And I am very proud and privileged to work in a company that is doing it. We are launching many programs to support people outside the boundaries of our organization. This makes me very proud and very engaged. And I would like to invite all large organizations that have the bandwidth, but even the small one, because it's not just, to really think about how can I contribute to our society? How can I be the driver of a social innovation that makes sense and then helps, people in need or navigating the tough time that we're going through. That is something I'm really passionate about.
Perfect. Now, I'll pick up your point of dreaming and Catalina's point of what was happening in the HR field a few years ago and where we're heading. Just for you to think of 5-10 years into the future, when you think about HR transformation, what are some of the things you want to see more of? And what are some of the things you want to see less of, or at all you don't want to see any of those? What are the top things that come to your mind on how HR transformation as a domain within its own right will evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
So I'll pick up from Elisa's point on this is the moment to really now step into that strategic space. And I think we have a unique opportunity, but it's also a challenge that we've played such a pivotal role this year in so many organisations. And that we use that to combine as she says, how do we make people happy? How do we create the environments that people get very personalised? Someone's asked about how do we make it more personal, people have got personal values. So the HR experience or the employee experience needs to be personal. I think there's a risk that we go backwards and step more into nannying our organisations, trying to create more policies and processes to manage them through that, because it feels a safer way to do it. I think that the massive opportunity is actually to move through that and create the dialogue and the conversation about how line managers become personal and engaged and able to respond to the individual circumstances of their people in whatever country they're in. I mean, that's one of the challenges at the moment if you've got global organisations. What's going on is the same pandemic, but very different depending on where you are in the world. And then really HR step into the space more and more about shaping the organisation, seeing round the corners that the business hasn't seen, and being that strategic. And that's for me what strategic really means, is we're enabling the organisation to see around the corner and be ready for the future with the skills and the talent that it needs. And that's what I dream of.
Thank you.
I think building on that, I dream that in a way we get so good at empowering the workforce and especially line managers that we make ourselves redundant in a way. And I went to a study trip to Facebook many years ago. I'm not sure if any of you is from Facebook here, but they told us the great story that the culture of Facebook is such that there is so much empowerment to line management and staff that they don't really need HR business partners. They have just very strong center of expertise that power all the great people practices and tools and everything. But there's such a culture of it's all about strength, it's all about skills, it's all about empowering teams that really you don't need this nanny going about. And I think, as Claire said, it would be great in the future, fast forward, to be such that you drive the purpose, you drive the strategy, and the experience is seamless. There's not a lot of policies, because again the policies are in the fabric of the company. They are part of the day-to-day. It's nothing you need to worry about. You treat people with a lot of trust and respect, so then obviously it goes hand in hand with having a solid culture, right? And it's more focused around well-being and empowering people to be their best whatever. And also the world of employment is being disrupted as well. We'll need to learn how to deal with gig workers, with different, absolutely different kind of models of employment and things. So that's also exciting to look forward to that, right? How we power not just our employees, but also bigger communities, from gig workers to suppliers and everything. Apologize, my dog is crying in the background. Let me kick her out.
So what I dream of is a human resources which is intelligently an augmented function. So use technology and AI and whatever for whatever it makes sense, and keep the human part of this job, keep the innovation part of this job, because there's a lot of things that are changing, and we need to constantly bring into our managers, you know, what is happening, behavioral changes, societal changes. The dream is also of that the discussion about diversity, inclusion, and equality does not even exist anymore. So these are the dreams.
I was going to say I like that, but I think we need to go back to some of the basics and what do we envision HR to look like in the future and serve organizations, and where we add most value to that landscape of what is digitized, what is personalized, and how we make decisions, intelligence decisions of separating those for large scale organizations as well. So we don't have that direct interaction with hundreds of thousands of employees.
Well, if I may add a final comment, there is something that I think Catalina, myself, and Claire have in common. HR is positioned to be a super strategic function. It's up to us to take this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Now, for the last few minutes, I just want to revert this panel Q&A and ask you, what is the one question you would ask HR professionals that have been joining us tonight for this session?
One question. Wow, that's really difficult.
I think it would be what has been the hardest thing you've done this year, and the one thing that you didn't know you had in your toolkit and you did, right? I think it's, to use the word disruptive is an understatement of what the last year meant, especially in a function where you are the people person. So you have to take care of your own well-being, your family, be worried about everything around you, but also be the caretaker of, you know, your workforce, right? So, you know, I felt often completely inequipped to deal with this, right? And for people to look at me for guidance about if they come into the office, if they don't, what they do, all of these things, you know, I felt completely out of my comfort zone and out of my depth many times during the last year. So felt very humbled from that perspective, but also in a way proud and you know, fortunate to be in a function like HR in this time. But again, that would be my question.
Thank you, Catalina.
So I think I would, it sort of, for me, is, yeah, understanding what makes you proud to be HR and what's making you therefore excited about the future opportunity. And I suppose linked to that, it would be a kind of, okay, and then by extension, what's making you fearful? Because I think if we have an honest dialogue across professionals, then we can understand how better we unlock our own potential. And I think we maybe don't talk enough about both what excites us, but also what we're fearful of.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel aligned with both Catalina and Claire, but no surprise. Maybe the question is, I would make is, what are you going to do from tomorrow on to be bolder than you've been before? That would be a question, to dare to have the impact that human resources could have. And I came to this question because actually Claire said what I had in mind to say before, but that would be my question.
Thank you very much it's been 90 minutes of exploration, discussion, brain juices flowing in all directions, making us think, challenge what we consider HR transformation to look like in our organizations. think about the context of everything that you've taught us tonight and you shared with us. So again, huge thanks for your amazing contribution. Huge thanks for accepting to be part of this event and influence the people profession in the right direction. Virtual round of applause, I think, as we still have people with us. And thank you very much for your time, your energy, your passion, and your expertise.
It was my great pleasure, and I'm thanking you for having invited me to join this discussion with this great woman that you know, Catalina and I were connected in many years, and I had the pleasure to connect with Claire. It was a true pleasure. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope people, you know, get some input and insights from this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chip. Good night, everyone. Stay safe and stay well, and hopefully another meeting somewhere in a nice location with some drinks. How crazy is that idea?
Thanks all.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.